If silence is the secret to sanity, then these are crazy times. Gratuitous music on a news report is the least of your worries. Noise pollution's so bad, the government has a map to track it. So we chose a London hotspot to hear a voice of protest.
I've been in England for nearly 20 years and it's definitely getting a lot noisier. A lot of it's about respect. You know, people don't tend to have as much respect for others' personal space as they used to. That's what I've noticed over the time I've been here.
Time was, the ASBO was the big gun in the fight against antisocial noise, but ASBOs have been abolished, leaving a gap in enforcement.
For the general areas that the public are concerned about, the legislation is absolutely fine. But in relation to issues where people are vulnerable or being victimized or too scared to speak to their neighbours, that's where we feel that the legislation needs to be reviewed.
Truth is, noise is the Cinderella of pollution. But recent research suggests it's harming children and killing adults. Somewhere quieter to meet a man who's a big noise on the health effects of sound.
I think the major health effects, the risk of high blood pressure, potentially even a small contribution to the risk of coronary heart disease, for instance, has been related to noise.
It's apparently affecting children's education too.
What we looked at there was the effects of road traffic and aircraft noise in primary school children, and found a pretty straight line, a linear effect of increasing aircraft noise on reading comprehension and a type of memory called recognition memory.
So the more noise there is, the more difficulty they have concentrating as a result?
Absolutely. Yeah, poorer reading compared with sort of national standards.
Newsnight's straw poll asked a random selection of people for their noise that annoys.
For me, it's probably antisocial behaviour after hours, just kind of people out on the streets, kind of screaming and shouting. That, you can put up with most stuff, but when it gets a bit too much like that, that's probably the most annoying for me.
What really gets you going?
Ignorancy.
Ignorance. Does that have a sound?
It does.
My one's neighbours playing loud karaoke like next door, and it's really annoying.
The other thing that gets people really wound up is people listening to music on their mobile phones on the speaker.
Yeah, that's the most annoying thing ever. When, like, I know I'm a teenager, but still, like, I don't go to the back of the bus and put on like loud grime music really loud so everyone can hear it.
Indeed, one man got so annoyed by that, he coined a word for it: sodcasting. Something like this.
Awesome.
That's the kind of thing.
Yeah, sounds like a bunch of twigs having sex. Yeah.
How long could you listen to it for?
Well, that's a tricky question because I listen to an awful lot of stuff that other people would consider to be like the sound of a fire in a pet shop. So it's not that it's noise, you know, but it is about sound in a contained environment where we don't all have a lot of choice about what we're listening to. You know, our hearing's a funny thing. Like we're much more kind of visually aware. We're very aware of how we use our eyes and what we pick out. But our ears work much more subconsciously. And, you know, it's amazing in an urban environment like this how much just general noise our brains are constantly filtering out, you know, so we can have this conversation without just, you know, being bombarded.
The World Health Organization says 1 in 50 Europeans have severely disturbed sleep because of noise. In the UK, complaints have increased 5-fold in 20 years. So maybe it is time to talk about noise footprints as well as carbon, and listen a little more to the sound of silence.
Well, with us now, the poet Ian Macmillan, and joining us from New York, George Prochnik, author of In Pursuit of Silence. Are you serious about this idea of a noise footprint, Ian?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I always thought of myself as a fairly quiet chap, and then I started to think about how many noises I'd made over my 55 years, from squealing at birth to this noisy chair that I'm sitting in now that's squeaking. And I thought, this is a huge footprint, so how do we start to regulate that? So I thought, well, for every noise I make, I should have a bit of silence. So for every loud scream that I've done at some point, then there should be a moment when I can sit and negate that scream in a little pool of silence. And this could catch on. So you'd have people being a bit noisy. When I'm watching Barnsley tomorrow night play Leeds, it'll be noisy. Yeah. Then somehow I can find a place that I could be quiet.
It's quite possible you could just be seen as very antisocial periodically.
Well, you could do that. You could go and sit quietly on the equivalent of a desert island, but then there'd be noise there as well. So it's how you select your noise, I guess.
Now, Mr. Proshnik, is life really noisier, or is it just that the nature of noise has changed?
Well, I think definitely the nature of noise has changed. If we were to go to a Victorian city, we might well find ourselves living closer to a heavy manufacturing concern than we would today because zoning was less developed. But at the same time as there might have been very loud noise sources next to where we live, today I think noise is much more ubiquitous. Fewer and fewer of us have any easy access to little pockets of silence, which in the past there might have been a temple yard, a cemetery, a riverbank that didn't have a highway next to it that would have allowed at least some respite. So that I think it's possible to say that while it may not be noisier today, there is paradoxically still less silence. And it's the cultivation of silence that we really need to try to promote in order to bring about more sanity. I think we just feel besieged at this moment.
You can't see him, but Ian McMillan here is nodding away, aren't you?
Yeah, because I like this
silent
idea.
Support.
This is silent support. I like the idea of these little pockets of silence that somehow they could be manufactured. I think that what you get to do is somebody who has a noisy job would then have to do a bit of half an hour's silent penance. So someone who drives a tractor in the evening would have to sit and make a quiet place somewhere.
But is there a sense in which people have kind of lost the art of being silent? You very much notice it when you go to the movies, for example, and people talk throughout them. The libraries now are no longer quiet anymore.
It's up to yourself to do it.
Hang on a second, Mr. Proshnik. Go on.
I was thinking that for yourself, you must do it for yourself. We can't tell other people to be quiet. We have to try and be quiet for ourselves, I think.
George Prochnik?
I think it's an enormous problem. When I traveled around the world researching for my book, what I discovered is that there were people all over, not just in cities, but who no longer know what silence means, who literally have no silence in their lives. They moved from homes which are loud because of perhaps people talking on multiple cell phones and different kinds of entertainment devices all blasting simultaneously, to loud streets, loud restaurants, loud cars, and loud shops, and even loud schools. So I think that before we can really tell people to be quiet, we have to understand that millions of people no longer know what quiet is, and we have to work as a society to allow experiential silence to be introduced through little parks, through different sorts of spaces that everyone can go to, and not just people who can buy boutique silence, but the entire populace.
It's also about respect for others, of course, isn't it? It's about the readiness to impose your particular music or whatever it is on others. Do you agree with that?
Well, I do, because I like Captain Beefheart. I would listen to Captain Beefheart all day long, but perhaps I would make sure that my headphones were so tightly in that nobody else could hear him. So there is that thing of the person on the bus, but can you turn to them and tell them to be quiet, or do you try and create a kind of space within yourself that's silent? That's the difficult thing. If you try to tell somebody to be quiet on the bus, they might smack you around the chops noisily.
Yeah, so what you do is stick in something that's going to make noise in your ears.
Yes, and that's all right in a way.
That's very... I wonder, Mr. Proshnik, about the whole idea of trying to persuade people that silence is a good thing in itself. Why is silence a good thing?
Well, we have increasing evidence, whether neurological evidence through studies done on silent meditation about the enhanced capacities for concentration that come through spending time in silence. We have evidence from many, many educators about the ways that moments of silence introduced in the course of a school day can be one of the only things that settles down our hyperactive children today. And in fact, I really think we have to look at the noise problems. We have to fold that into the larger problem of overstimulation that's striking us throughout society now.
Okay,
we have children.
We've got two ideas here. You had this idea of a silence boutique, and Ian McMillan here had an idea of a noise footprint. Any other ideas, quickly?
I think you just combine the two, so you get a silence boutique where you go and sit and contemplate your noise footprint in a silent way. This could be the start of a new movement, Jeremy, I think.
Certainly. Any you want to add to this, Mr. Proshnik?
I think that one way to think about our problem might be to view it in the same way we view a dietary problem. Right now we live in a world of fat, inflated sounds. What we need to do is introduce more healthy sounds into our diet. Not absolute silence, but natural sounds. Sounds of birds, of water, sounds of human conversation, and not be overwhelmed by the electroacoustic emission in which many of us are enveloped.
Organic noise, that's the answer. Okay, thank you both very much indeed. Thanks.
My pleasure.